Oh my gosh. This will be fun. I'm going down the freeway. Here's my freeway test drive. And away we go. Yeah, these people aren't going. I'm in rush hour traffic. Here we go. I'll tap on the brakes. Yeah, nice steering wheel shimmy. Real nice. Anytime you get a shimmy out of your front brakes like that, anytime you get a shimmy and your steering wheel starts shaking like mad, yeah, it's going to need some front brakes. There's no question. That's so bad. Oh my God. I get a kick out of that noise, man. I don't know what the heck that is. I wonder if my microphone's picking it up. It's only in between, like, somewhere in between 2,000 RPMs, and then it goes away. I don't know if it's from the engine rattling around or the transmission or what. These brakes are so bad. Oh my God. After you take it on a test drive, if you got warped front rotors, first thing you want to do is, you know, get everything warmed up really good and make sure your rims aren't hot. They feel like they're about the same temperature. You can touch the rotor too, but sometimes it'll fry your fingers. Because if you got a stuck caliper, it'll be that hot. You just barely touch it and you'll start singeing everything. You can fry a piece of bacon on these sometimes. They're about good, so I'm going to rule out calipers. He does drive it on the highway a lot. I'm going to have to check his rear drums too, make sure they're not out of adjustment. The pedal height feels good though. So yeah, if your rear drums aren't working very well, you're gonna make your fronts do too much work. So yeah, I'm gonna check those out. This will be my first brake job on YouTube. Here's his check engine light code. PO420. Things probably needs a catalytic converter. Really the only way you can check a warped rotor is with a dial indicator. Kind of like this. Torque these bolts to spec. And right here I got about 4 thousandths, which is too much. If you got a warped rotor, if you think it's warped, you look on the inside and see if there's any big patches of rust or anything on there. Another thing you can do too is check the parallel. You get a micrometer or a vernier caliper, and you check the distance in between here, and if it's thicker or thinner, it's gonna make it pulsate. Usually when the steering wheel shakes though, it's because you have a warped rotor. And if it's out of parallel, if it's not parallel, usually you feel it more in the brake pedal. You'll just get a shake and no shimmy in the steering wheel. You'll also get a pedal vibration if your rear drums or rear rotors are out. That's pretty much what I've learned from my experience, and I'm usually right about it. Sometimes it can trick you very so often. On this car, the brake pads are actually good, but the abutment clip, somebody put brakes in here and, well, they didn't know what the hell they were doing, so I just might get all new stuff. Yeah, and these drums, there's little threaded threaded holes on here. They're 8 by 125. You can just use nuts or bolts. Just go a little at a time. They usually pop right off. Sometimes you'll strip the threads out. There, I got it. Oh yeah, he's got no brake pad here either. See that? That'll give him warped rotors because his rear brakes aren't working the way they're supposed to. I'll be putting rear shoes on it too and a hardware kit. You always want to put a hardware kit on brakes. Wheel cylinder looks good. I'll check the other side. Oh yeah, this one's down to nothing too. Nothing there. First thing you're going to want to do with a brake job, you want to pull this caliper in. You can use a C-clamp or whatever. I use C-vice grips because they're awesome, and that's what I have, and that's what I use. And it's nice to pull these in before you take all the stuff apart because you want to make sure that the slides are okay. You want to make sure these caliper slides aren't all rusted and crap, because if they are, you got to take it all apart and clean them or replace the calipers. And they pull in nice, and they didn't get hot or anything when I drove them, and both of them move really good, so I'm going to call these calipers good. These top bolts are 14 millimeters on this car. I'll pull this in the rest of the way. People always say never let these hang like that. Don't ever do that because I guess you can wreck the hose. I still have yet to see that happen. Since I'm going to be reusing these pads too, I'm gonna want to make sure they move really good without sticking. This one's a little sticky. And yeah, if they stick, basically what that tells you is you want to take these clips out, and underneath here there's usually rust underneath the clips on the caliper bridges. You want to clean those really good. Then when you put it all back together, you want to make sure they slide really nice. These are 17 millimeter bolts on the rear of the bridge. Sometimes with these warped rotors, you might find that there's big chunks of rust on here. So I use a chip and hammer because I like using chip and hammers on rust. You just want to make sure there's no real high spots on here. If there is, it'll just fly right off. There's a little spot right there. It's nothing big. Sometimes you think you got a nice surface and then you hit it with a chip and hammer and there's just big chunks to fly off of here. It's pretty good. You could grind it if you want. I got this super scraper. Just gonna hit all the real, scrape some of this rust off of here. Same with this, you want to make sure there's no high spots on the caliper. You can hit it with a draw file or a scraper, a file. There's chunks of stuff in here. Any little high spots on this caliper can cause the pad to just barely hit the rotor. Make little squeaky noises sometimes. So you want to make sure that's good and flat. Yeah, somebody didn't cheap out on these pads. There's an inner and an outer. So yeah, these are some high dollar pads. Somebody put the fancy stuff in here and they suck at it. Yeah, this pad is stuck in here. I got the pads off and these abutment clips. See all this rust? That's what's making the pad stick. Somebody just slapped this stuff together thinking they know what they're doing. Just as usual, I like to use a chip and hammer. Chip all this crap out of here. It's actually really thick. file all this down so I get down to the metal again. See that? That's metal. Metal. No rust. That's what you want. There. The clear white silicone paste or dielectric grease, that's all you want to put in here. Don't put anything else in there. Yeah, see, this has got a good amount on it already. And it's the right stuff. Sometimes when people do brake jobs on here, you'll take it apart and like that purple stuff that you saw me take off of the brake pads. They put that same crap in the caliper slides and it's wrong. What's going to happen is it'll end up getting thick and caking up, and then your slides are going to stick and they won't work anymore. So don't do it. Dielectric grease, silicone only. Now, as far as these drums go, rarely do I ever turn them. I've even had them chewed up pretty bad. There's a little bit of chew marks in here. I usually just take a sanding disc and just sand them down real good. I didn't feel any pedal pulsations on this car either, and usually when you have warped drums you can feel the pedal moving, because your rear drums, if you have rear drums, it's usually all about your pedal height. If your pedal height is really low, it's usually because you got a brake adjustment issue. You need to adjust it up. And if it pulsates a lot, it's usually because of your drums. And not all the time, but usually. I'm just going to measure these. This one's perfectly round. To be honest with you too, rarely do I ever even measure these. I'm just doing it right now because I'm doing a video on it. I mean, if I put everything back together and I felt a pulsation, I would go after the drums and just go get them resurfaced. But I'm not going to need to. Doing this kind of work is completely disgusting. Doing brake work in general. So if you plan on doing this stuff, I would recommend using a dust mask unless you feel like blowing black boogers. Now, you don't need to get all crazy. Basically, you just want to get this lip off of here so it slides on and off the drum real easy. That's it. Okay, here's the second one I just did. Yeah, you can see there's a nice groove in there. Really, that's not a big deal as far as I'm concerned. You know, if you feel like getting them resurfaced, you know, go for it. You got anything bad to say about me running it like that? I don't care. I've done so many rear drums, you wouldn't believe what I've let go, and it's fine. They don't make noise. It might, but I doubt it. There, good enough. Yeah, I like taking chances. If it makes noise, I'll just take it all apart and get it resurfaced then. Until then, usually they're always nice and quiet. One thing I learned about brakes, you know, every time you go work for somebody, they pretty much just about insist that you go to a brake class of some kind. And then by the time you get out of the brake class, you're confused because those people are confusing. And then you go take your ASE brake test, and if you go there with all the knowledge you need to know to make a set of brakes work, you're going to fail because you need to learn about their agenda and how to answer their questions. And if you don't know how to answer their questions, you're going to fail. So there's a big difference between doing what people want you to do and doing a job that's going to work and reduce the amount of comebacks and problems that you're going to face. Brakes are not that tricky, but people make it seem that way. So whatever, that's my story. How do you like me now? Yeah, I got some nice new brake rotors. A lot of times you take a brake class and they tell you need to soak these in a bucket of soapy water. Yeah, whatever. What do? Hose it down with glass cleaner. I don't use a bucket of soapy water. I don't use brake cleaner. Glass cleaner's cheap. You don't need a lot. It lifts all the cosmoline and grease right off of this. I mean, look what it does to a window. Put it on a window, what's left on the window when you use glass cleaner? Nothing. And you saw me use glass cleaner and wipe it with a rag. And after you do that, you want to kind of run your hands across it. Make sure there's no lint stuck on there, because anytime you use a rag or a towel, it can come apart and get in the surface of the rotor. So just make sure none of that junk's on there. Throw the thing on. Everybody's got their own way of doing stuff. And this way I have had very little comebacks. And they always seem to work very good for me. So this is the way I do it. I always try to find a better way. And the way I'm doing it right now is the best way I've figured out on my own. So other people will tell you to do different, I'm sure. Everybody's got their own opinion on a freaking brake job. I just do what works best for me. Okay, now I can put these brake pads in. Put a little bit on here. Just make sure the surface doesn't have any big chunks of stuff or rust on it. Flip it over, do the same to this side. The disc brake quiet, brake lube, brake jizz, whatever you call it, stuff. There's so many different kinds of this stuff. You could use nothing and it'd probably work almost as good, just so long as everything's clean. Gotta hold these pads in. Torque these to whatever they tell you. And after you put them on, just kind of give everything a wiggle. Make sure the slides work good. Because if these pins are bent or anything, it's not going to work right. And make sure you got everything bolted on and it'll be just fine. I'd say about the most interesting thing about rear brakes is they're always a little different. And I never really know what to do until it's already done, because there's so many different kinds of rear drums and setups with springs and stuff. Most important thing to do is do one side at a time. And when you do one side at a time, if you got one side that's got broken parts or something in it, do that side first. The reason why is because you always want to reference one. You know, make sure you have one that's all put together. So if you take something apart and you forget something, what way one of these little clips or something goes, you can just go to the other side and look and see what the heck's going on. Now with this, I got this fancy cheapy little tool. You can use like a pair of pliers or a vice grip too to get these pins out. I usually always take these out first. And with these, you're supposed to just be able to push it in and turn it. I'm going to get this little spring out of here. I'll use the side cutters for that. Side cutters grip on these really good. So now that I got that out, I'm thinking I can just take this out in one piece. That little clip right there, I got to take out. That's another reason why I want a hardware kit, because this is going to need to be new. Just kind of push on it. It should spread it open. I got one of these jobbies for a spring puller tool too. You just put it on here like this. There you go, I got that one out. I'm just going to screw this adjuster in all the way. You can lube these too if they get stuck. This one feels really nice though, so I'm going to leave it. A little silicone on there. See, I got it all stacked up so it looks like that. And I know where everything goes. All these little high spots here, you can see there's little wear marks on them. That's where the brake shoes sit. You just want to get a scraper of some kind and just... Usually never get all the stuff off. little flakies, and there's usually always 6 pads. You want to get your brake pasty stuff. You want to lube all these high spots. All the mating surfaces too, like the top right here, the wheel cylinders. Some in the grooves down here. And believe it or not, one of the most important parts is this hole right here on the back side. That pin moves around a lot, and if it's not lubed, it can make noise. Yeah, you want to make sure these wheel cylinders move back and forth real good too. You got to be careful they don't pop out either, because if you push on this side too much, it'll pop the other side out. I'm going to put this on first. Squeeze that on. See how I pulled on that and everything wanted to fly out? That's exactly what you don't want. You can get that piston to come out, and then you'll get brake fluid all over the freaking place and make a huge mess. So, put a little C-vise on here, a vice grip to keep it from coming out. See, now that I'm done with this side, now I know what I'm doing. Otherwise, I wouldn't. Now you want to kind of go back and forth like this. Make sure it doesn't squeak. It should be nice and smooth. And there should be no noises, and there isn't. So if there's no noises now, there's not going to be any squeaky noises when you put it all back together. I can feel a light amount of drag on it right now, which is what you want. So I don't need to adjust this up at all. There must be almost no wear on this drum. Okay, I got this side all together and it's not touching at all. So I want it a little tighter. Twist it up. Oh, that's too tight. I screw it back in. Oh, that looked dangerous. It's close. It's still too tight. Oh. I just turned it down all the way. Yeah, even though it wasn't touching, it was really super close. See, now it's not touching. I could get picky and go up just a little bit more. There, now it's barely touching. You want just a little bit of resistance. You get too much and it'll heat up the drum. If it heats up the drum, the hotter it gets, the tighter it'll get. You don't want that, but you want it to just barely touch. Then you'll get a nice high pedal height. You'll get good responsive brakes. Okay, yeah, I'm done. I'm going to slap some tires on this and go for a drive. Okay, now what you want to do before you go anywhere, pump up your brakes. You got to load them calipers up. If you don't do that, you try to leave your damn driveway, this thing will just go right to the floor and it's not going to stop really good. Okay, now going to be real light on the brakes. Usually if they start grinding, you'll hear it right away, just being really light on the brakes. Just be real nice the first couple of brakes, because basically if you got any stuff that's stuck on the rotors, you want it to fly off. You don't want to embed it in the brake pads. So you just want to do some real light braking right off. Get it up to 30 miles an hour. Just slow down real slow. Sounds real good. Well, actually it doesn't sound like anything. I don't hear any brake noise. Still got that horrible transmission noise or whatever it is. He's going to have to deal with that. Slow down again. Yeah, by the third time, if it's not making any noise, it's not going to. No pulsations either. It's all gone. So this is a good job. You can use your brakes any way you want after you do that. They're broke in. Okay, bye.